I've been in sales and sales management my entire life, my entire professional life, and I had the great experience to go from a international VP of sales into an international VP of sales ops role, which really helped me start this company. And I'll talk a little bit about kind of the premise on why we started the company. But it was a great transition for me to really understand how the sales organization really operates. So spending all of my time out in the field in front of customers, and then what it really takes to run and drive a sales organization, not from a sales leadership role, but from an operations role, was just a tremendous experience for me. I did it for a company called PTC. I was really, really lucky to work for a company called PTC. That company went from 0 to $1 billion in less than 10 years. At the time, it was the fastest growth rate in all of software. They went 40 straight quarters, 10 years of accurately predicting their number and never missing the number. So it was a wonderful run. And then I was just in Europe. The last assignment that I had, I was Senior Vice President of International Sales Operations, and my kids were just getting older. I was supposed to be there for 2 years, and I wound up being there for 5 years. Don't let that, you can make any assumption you want about how long it took me to get the job done right, but it was just time for me to come home, and I wanted my kids to go to school in the United States in the high school years. So we started a company called Force Management about 13 years ago. Have any of you in the room heard of Force Management before? Anybody? Okay, a few of you. Good things, bad things? Okay things? Oh, you're at Sprinkler. Awesome. Did I meet you? Okay. Sorry about that. Was it in Dallas? Awesome. It's good to see you again then. So we are a sales effectiveness company, and we had a point of view on, you go from 0 to $1 billion in less than 10 years, and you accurately predict your number for 10 years, 40 quarters. There are some fundamental things that were really in place. And so it was a great transition for me, and we started a company called Force Management. So I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the fundamental things. And when I talk to you, so remember, I'm kind of with you, but you guys are a lot smarter than me. I was a sales-focused person that went into operations. And so how many of those are in the room here? Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. Like, I wasn't analytical, but the power of analytics, the power of process, I had no idea. And I just want to give you some spirit. I had the opportunity to see what that looks like and see what it does for a sales organization. So much so that I wound up and I started a company to go provide it to other sales organizations. So I want to give you some spirit. I know it doesn't feel like that all the time in a sales operations role, but I want to give you some spirit around sitting in the seat of the people that you represent. You're like the protectors of the sales organization in a lot of different ways. You are the planners, the strategists of the sales organization. I want to just try to give you some spirit around that. But I want you to think about, so our customer at Force Management GrowthPlay is the worldwide VP of sales. And when they tell us what their problems are, what do you think they tell us? What problems do you have, Mr. or Mrs. VP of sales? What do you think they tell us? What is it? What is it? I'm not hitting budget. Sorry, go ahead. I can't forecast accurately. Really good. What else? I need more leads. Good. What else? I need more resources. Good. What else? What else? What are you hearing? What are you hearing? Yeah, now you're getting a little more real. Issues with product doesn't do this. What else? What else? What problems? See, I need you to stand in the moment of that truth, or you're going to struggle to be relevant for me as a sales leader. This is what they tell us every single day. These are the top things that they tell us. Then I want you to give me some feedback. How many of these things do you think you actually impact? So they tell me sales messaging doesn't resonate with the customer. How many of you are sitting there in sales operations go, that ain't my problem? How many would you say that in the room? Or how many of you feel like you can actually impact that? Okay? They told me that you wanted this to be interactive, right? I'm just checking. All right. Changing messaging frequently confuses the sales force. High turnover in the sales force. Poor qualification of accounts and sales opportunities. Inability to forecast the business accurately. No consistent customer engagement model. No repeatable operating rhythm that coordinates sales teams' activities. Is starting to sound a little bit more familiar? Are there any of them up here that you don't think that you can impact? Speak freely. Yes? What is it? What don't you think you can impact? Oh, sorry, you said you think you can impact all of them. Is there anybody that sees anything up here that you think, I don't know how I'm relevant for that in operations? Okay, good. That's what I was hoping your answer is going to be. So the point of view became, when we looked at those problems, and when we looked at the history of performance and the greatest, most elite sales organizations in the world, how many of you feel like you have an elite sales organization? How many of you want to have an elite sales organization? How many of you feel like your job would be so much easier if you had an elite sales organization? So there's a gap between, and then let me just ask another part. How many of you really believe you have anything to do with creating an elite sales organization? Okay, so that's really good news. That's really, really good news. So I want you to think about this. These 4 quadrants just became so simple for us. And I want you to think about the left-hand side here for a second. The left-hand side, the 2 quadrants on the left-hand side is how you engage with your customers. I just want to break it down. Now remember, I'm speaking to you from a VP of sales point of view, and when we speak to VP of sales, and we try to get things in buckets, we try to simplify it for the VPs of sales. Like their problems and challenges, we try to simplify it, because if you don't simplify it, it's overwhelming. And that should be part of your job. Your job, when you were so good for me as a VP of sales, is when you help simplify my thinking about the problem. Don't tell me how big the problem is and tell me how much water we're taking on the ship. Help me simplify the problem in my thinking, because if I can't simplify the problem, I can't simplify my solution to the sales organization. If you don't have a simplified solution to the sales organization, it doesn't matter what data you come up with, it doesn't matter what strategies you come up with, it's over, because they're not going to consume it. How many of you are working with sales organizations right now that aren't consuming what you're providing? Okay, now there's a lot of different reasons for that. Weak sales leadership, immature sales organizations. There's a lot of different reasons, but at the end of the day, those are all excuses, because you will not create an elite sales organization. And I believe the people that came to this conference, at least the ones they told me, the reason why you came to this sales conference is that's really what you're trying to do. So I want you to think about the left side of the quadrant is how you engage with your customers. And the right side of the quadrant is how the sales management team operates. So if you can get the VP of sales to think about those 2 things, how we engage with our customers and how we operate as a sales management team, those 2 fundamental things resonate highly with VPs of sales. What I'd like to do over the next few minutes is I'd like to dive into each one of these categories and just give you just a few takeaways. And at the end, we put together just a little tool that we thought would be helpful for you as a takeaway. So like evidence of high performance in sales organizations, on the most elite sales organizations that we see. And I'd like you to just look at that on your plane ride home or whatever and just ask yourself a question like, how elite are we? And why not? And hopefully, it'll start to pinpoint some areas or problems in each one of these areas so you'll be able to do something with it. And then we'll leave you with, if you need to contact us or anybody if you have questions about it, we probably won't be able to get too deep to it today, but if you have any questions about it, we're certainly available to talk about it. All right, let's talk about this, the left side. We believe the cornerstone. If I got your executives, I want to simulate this just for a second. You got to do me a favor. You cannot take any pictures of this up here. Anything on the front is perfect, but not up here. Grass does not grow on a busy highway. A lot going on up here, a lot going on. All right, up in the upper left-hand quadrant, I want you to write these essential questions down. And you should be the bastion. You should be the protector of this. Number one, if I got all your executives, product, marketing, engineering, customer success, whatever they are, sales, finance, and I ask these 4 essential questions. Here they are. What problems do you solve for your customers? What problems do you solve for your customers? Number 2, how specifically do you solve them? How specifically do you solve them? Number 3, how do you solve them differently or better than anybody else in your industry? How do you solve them differently or better than anybody else? If you're crazily trying to write these down, I promise you I'm going to show it to you up on a screen. Sorry about that. I'm going to do it. And then the last one is, where have you done it before? Where have you done it before? We call these having command of your message. It's called the sales conversation on this slide here. It's having command. The most elite sales organizations in the world have command of their message. So what does that have to do with sales operations? I believe sales operations too often today is so far away from thinking of that interaction with the customer, I think we're missing the boat. Because if you don't stand in the moment of that truth between a rep, I call it a 3-foot conversation. I don't care if it's on a telephone. I don't care if it's face-to-face. If you don't stand in the moment of that truth, what are you operationalizing? Because if you can't get me past that upper left-hand quadrant, you ain't going to make it. How many of you feel like if I got all of your executives in a room, and I do this as an exercise, I ask them to write down on a piece of paper the answers to those 4 essential questions, the CEO, CFO, CTO, CMO, CRO, Cs, and I ask them to answer those 4 essential questions. How consistent do you think those answers are? I've been doing this for 13 years, not once. And I've been with some of the most elite companies in the world, and not once has it come back consistent. And my answer always is, if we can't do it in here, what are the reps going to do? And again, I don't care what you're operationalized. I don't care what data you're looking at. I don't care what pipeline velocity you're looking at. It's over if you can't get past this. Are you with me? So let me just give you, and I know I'm probably speaking to you on things that you already know, but let me give you some spirit and some hygiene around this. The first thing we look for is, how does this align to a customer's buying process? So if you have a sales process right now, check yourself on this. If your sales process does not visually and operationally connect to a customer's buying process, you're left field. Meaning, if you have a sales process and you can't connect for me how that connects to a way a customer buys, then you're in left field. You're going to have some gaps. Now, add this to the complexity. How many of your customer engagement models look like this? How many of you have an engagement model that looks like this? You're getting marketing leads, qualified leads, I'm a seller, qualified leads, that's a whole nother topic. I don't have enough time. Qualified leads, then that gets a handoff to a BDR. A BDR has a handoff to an inside sales. Inside sales has a handoff to an account executive, to a sales engineer. The complexity of the selling functions today is drastically different than it was even a decade ago. So all these areas are leakages of value. So we go out and create and capture value out in the sales conversation, and it leaks away here because nobody's on the same page of what value means. For example, we have a methodology we talk about. We say there's 3 things you take away from a customer, there's 3 things you deliver. We break it down to really simple things. The 3 things you take away from a customer are, Positive business outcomes. What business outcomes are they trying to achieve? Required capabilities. What's technically required in order to achieve those positive business outcomes? And by the way, once I look at those required capabilities, I can instantly see whether or not my company can win, because those better be highly favorable for us. And how is the customer going to measure success? Metrics. 3 things you take away: positive business outcomes, required capabilities, and metrics. It's like a golf swing. Customer is not going to pay you. They're going to pay you for use. They want insights. They want knowledge. And customers are really, really smart, especially SaaS customers are really, really smart in this model. When they sign up for something or they renew, they're like, hey, it's okay, but it's not that great. We're using it, but not really using it. And so what are they doing? They're renewing. Maybe they're not churning because we're looking at churn. Our customers aren't churning. But how many of are renewing for less? So we're kind of fooling ourselves with some of those metrics. Well, one of the things we look at is what value, if you and I don't have a common language, if I'm going to you as services or to customer success and I'm sales and I'm handing this off to you, I got to have a simple language or methodology. And if I have like positive business outcomes, required capabilities, and metrics, and the customer signed off on this, said, yes, this is what we're looking for. And that gets translated all the way through, which is the next big bullet point I want to give you. Don't train a sales organization again. Don't just train a sales organ. Sales initiatives and sales training is ridiculous. Because this is the world we live in. And products are behind this, engineering's behind this, marketing's behind this. You can't train a sales organization. So you have to be the bastions of this. Because they're going to come and they're going to say, okay, it's Q2 or it's Q3 or whatever. We want to train the sales organization. On what? Well, we just haven't trained them in a while. Let's train them. And if it's not aligned behind this engagement model, or not this one, but an engagement model, whatever your engagement model is, it's going to fail. Because the most elite sales organizations in the world, they don't do sales training, they do company training. And they give the backing behind the sales organization. So when I'm a seller and I know I'm going to go and grab that arrow out of that quiver, and I grab that thing, it is stiff, ready to go. It's not, blah, 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 blah. They want me to try out this product, blah, blah, blah. I'll do it once. When I grab this thing and I try to put it I'll do it once, and I'll never sell it again. I'll never try to sell it again. When they say I got to turn it over to customer success or I got to go to implementation, blah, 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 it's wobbling, I'll never do it again. And that's why you have sellers that don't turn things over. They keep it the entire way through. And what happens to their productivity? So I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here. I'm just trying to break these things down. Every time we show this to a VP of sales, their jaw drops wide open and says, this is a major problem for me. Well, we start to look at it and we say, yeah, well, I want you to write down some things really quickly. If your sales process, who in here has a sales process that you could articulate to me? Come on, you got to have more than that. You got to be able to give me your sales process. You should be able to give it to me like verbatim. Because if you can't explain your sales process to me and put it on like one page, or just explain it to me, write it out on a napkin, you need to start over. I'm not saying that us as sellers that we're not like smart people, but you got to make it consumable. And here's some things I want to just keep you focused on. I said it's got to be aligned to your customer's buying process. That's what I would check your sales process. Go home and check this. Secondly, make sure that the activity, critical qualified activity, is by role and by sales stage. Who's doing what when? Especially if you're in a model like this. Because what happens is you'll identify people as 100-pound brains. Who's got 100-pound brains? Like the really smart people in your organizations, and they get pulled into everything. They're not scalable, and there's not enough 100-pound brains out there out in the marketplace. So you really have to make sure you're putting people in the right place at the right time. So qualified activity by role and by sales stage. How many of you in your sales process have customer verifiable outcomes, meaning what is the customer supposed to do and do? Good for you. And do they know it? How many times I go into a company, I'll just grab a rep real quick. I say, we got a deal? And they say, we got a deal, and I love a deal. So I look at the deal, and I say, okay, where are we? And they tell me where we are in the sales stage. And I look in Salesforce.com, and guess what? It doesn't match, but that's a whole nother thing. You guys have had a lot of different meetings on that. But then I look at it, and I say, does the customer know they're in that stage? What do you think the answer is? 90% of the time, the answer is no. The most elite selling organizations in the world, customers absolutely know what stage they are because it aligns to their buying process. You with me? Go back and check these at home. What tools are available to me? And you have to protect the sales force. How many of you get people that say, product says, hey, we want to do this with the sales force. Ooh, make Salesforce.com measure this. How many of you are doing that? You're spending all your time with these requests of people trying to get to the sales force. So your sales process has to have very clear plugins. How does somebody in an organization plug into the sales process? It should be very clear. And I always ask people, what problem are you trying to solve in my sales process? Ooh, we got to do this. I want the salespeople to do this. What problem are you trying to solve in the sales process? Make them dig into, because then it's not real. But a lot of times they'll say, this stage right here, because of the data that you guys are looking at, this stage right here, we're trying to solve this problem. I think that's a great tool. I think that's a great activity because it's going to highlight that problem. Use it for more than just stages in Salesforce.com. Make it real for the reps. Does it make sense? And then, how many of you have a real simple qualification process, simple and consumable qualification process as it relates to your sales stages? Many of you out here in the Bay Area or out here in California have been exposed to a methodology called MEDPIC or MEDIC. Have you heard of this before? Okay, if you haven't, write it down. It's one of the most simple and by the way, if I'm hiring sales reps and they've heard of MEDIC and they've been managed by MEDIC or MEDPIC or something like that before, I'm really looking at them in the interview process. Because that means that they have been very, very accountable to very specific qualification criteria in a sales process. And a lot of the elite companies are using that methodology. It's actually the methodology that PTC used 20 years ago. And it's still highly valued today. And many people, their Salesforce.coms or their Claris or whatever, it looks like MEDIC. Why? 40 straight quarters of making the number. How many of you have missed a forecast? 40 straight quarters. I'm not bragging about something that was 20 years ago. I'm not bragging about that. I'm just saying it was so simple, it was easily consumed. Okay? All right, I know I got to move along here. And I'm going to try to leave you some time a little bit for some questions, but they threw a lot at me here to try to give you some spirit around. Okay, this is one of my favorites. How are you prioritizing your resources toward your best market opportunities? Who does this really well? Nobody. This one blows my mind. I walk into companies every day, some of the best companies in the world, and I ask them, what does an ideal customer look like? Because you understand, all this stuff I've talked about, if we're not focusing it on an ideal customer, we're lost. Have you ever gotten a business you figured out you shouldn't have got, but you got the deal? In some of your companies, depending on where you are in your growth stages, it can kill a company if you go get the wrong business. So hold yourself accountable to be able, this is something, go home and ask the question. What is an ideal customer for us? You've got so many companies here, and in these breakout sessions, this is where I see data is one of the fundamental areas of data. I'm going to talk about these next two of where data can really, really become powerful for you. If you don't have a good answer, and your company doesn't have a good answer on what an ideal customer looks like, does it impact the kind of rep that you're going to have calling on it? Does it impact your sales process? Does it impact your value proposition? Does it impact every single one of these critical components of sales effectiveness? If you can't answer a fundamental question, and this is the good news, is because what you've been learning over the last couple of days, or what you've been learning more about, is this is data. And what I love about this is it changes over time. I've seen ideal customers begin to change, and I've seen the ideal customer change because I'm working with the sales teams, but yet nothing else is changing inside the company. So the ideal customer changed, but all the tools and methodology and our thought process didn't change along with it. And you're going to start to bleed out in the marketplace. Okay? So, on this side, let me make it real simple for you. Over here, 4 essential questions on value proposition. Here, the rigor behind the sales process of those things that I just talked to you about. When I move over here, I want you to think about this as how the sales management team operates. And this should be really, really close and near and dear to your heart. A lot of times people in your roles tell me, hey, this is really where I live. I get what you told me over here. This seems like kind of marketing dominates this one, blah, blah, blah. I think you have to have a voice and you have to be the protectors of the sales force in all of these areas. This one's a little bit more traditional for you, sales planning and execution. On the right-hand side, let me make it real simple for you. You got to get your sales leaders focused on 2 things. If you want to be an elite sales leader in the world today, you have to have command of 2 things. You got to have command of your plan, and you got to have command of your people. Simple. Command of your plan. What does it mean? You have to be able to accurately predict your business, or you won't keep your job. You guys know that, right? And how many of you had a sales VP change on your watch? Almost everybody in the room. If you can't accurately predict your number, you're not going to keep your job. That's what you guys really do for a living that can help. And one of the things that can help is the plan to make the plan. Sales organizations don't plan very well. So what is the plan to make the plan? Well, simplify it. The sales rep's view of the world is pretty simple. I've got an assignment or I've got a territory. I've got accounts inside of that, and I've got opportunities inside of that. And so if you can give me some rigor around how should I look at a territory? How should I look at accounts? How should I look at opportunities? And you can get common language and rigor around that, and you can get a fundamental principle in place that says we build pipeline at the territory level, at the assignment level, not at the forecast level. Do you understand what I just said? 90% of the organizations I go in, they build pipeline at what level? The forecast. What's that mean? It means we're not going to make our forecast, let's go build pipeline. It all begins with a great planning process. And it begins with great, this is where I believe this is the strength of this group. Because traditionally, you wouldn't have these jobs if you weren't great planners. What type of QBR process are you going to have in place? And I look at this as I look back at sales reps and like, you have to participate in your own rescue. What is your plan to make your plan? I'm going to give you a number as a sales VP. I'm going to give you a number, and I want to know how you're going to go get that number. You should be responsible at the beginning of every year. You should be responsible to present to me. And don't make it complicated.